Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit. This is our last meeting for the year. Now, I do have an apology from Councillor Mel Courtney. I'm happy to move. Seconded Councillor Bryant. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Order of business is as per the agenda. If you have any conflicts on any items in the agenda, feel free to let me know once we get to that item. We are live streaming, so please remember to use your microphones when you speak. We don't have any public forum, so I will go straight to confirmation of minutes, which are pages 6 to 12 of the agenda. If there's no corrections, then I'd ask for a mover. Move Councillor Bryant, second Councillor Walker. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I'm actually going to go with first names from now on. Yep, surely can. No one's ever accused me of being quiet, but I'm going to take that as a compliment. It's my quiet dulcet tones. Okay, so we'll next go to the Chairperson's report, which is just a very brief verbal one. I just want to thank the team for all the work they've done. That's our regional services staff, but also I want to include Andrew Bishop in that because I consider him part of our team. He does an amazing job with our finances. It's actually been quite a huge year. We've achieved a lot, and I know we're going to go to a carryover report that says we're in progress on a lot of things, but even the report that we have on today's agenda is significant work that we acknowledge took a lot of time, and it's just great proactive management, looking ahead, thinking about the landfill, what we do, what we provide today, tomorrow, and for hundreds of years in the future. And I think that's really important. You know, if I think of our Tita Ihu intergenerational strategy, Te Puna Pono, being good ancestors. A lot of what we're going to discuss today and a lot of what we do discuss for the Landfill Business Unit is actually about being good ancestors. So I'll also note that we've commenced the review for our terms of reference and deed of agreement. This is, I know in some ways it could feel like a distraction, but it's actually quite important when we look at, you know, the delegations, the clear lines, anything that supports our staff and the business unit to be able to do things simply is going to benefit them. And so this is part of the board's responsibility around ensuring that efficiency. So that's why for me, I was keen to get that work progressed. And I'd like to thank the members of the committee for their work and energy this year around the table, and of course in preparing for the meetings and the workshops we've had. So thank you all very much. If there's no questions or comments, I'll move on.
I just have one, and a big thank you from all of us around the table for the work you do as the chair and leading the team. So well done.
Thank you, Stuart.
And well done to everyone else as well.
Okay, so we'll now move on to page 13, which is the carryover report, and I'll hand over you to Brad. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. The report sets out the carryover funds from the 2020-21 year, which we'd like to carry over to 2021-22. It's not a huge dollar value, just shy of $900,000. In general, I could summarise that as saying that we've had a number of competing avenues of work at the landfill, some of which we've had to prioritise over other ones. That's resulted in some of the funds we intended to spend in 2021 still being available. That work that we are doing up there is critical and does need to happen, and we're just proposing to carry those funds over to 21-22.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I've got a question myself, just in regards to the piezo monitoring well. I just noted for resource consent compliance that we'd need to increase frequency of leachate level monitoring and piezo meters to weekly should the FOS reduce below 1.5.
We're on that threshold at the moment, is my understanding. Is that correct, Nathan? Yeah, so we're on that threshold. So those would look to start increasing when we tip over that factor of safety. I believe that the setback that we've put in place at the moment has offset that for the time being. So we're still above our factor of safety at present.
Okay, and that work will be able to, it does say once future monitoring requirements are confirmed, this well will be replaced in the correct location and to correct depth. So that work isn't going to impact on our ability to do that weekly monitoring if we get to that point?
No, there's a number of wells on site which manage it. This one's been out of commission for a wee while, is my understanding, and we just want to make sure that with all of the development that's going on, that well gets put back in the appropriate position to provide us with usable information.
Thank you. Any other questions on the carryover report? So just noting that basically what we do is this budget goes into the business plan, which we've got later in our agenda, and then all of those together, the business plan goes to the two councils for their feedback.
Right, just Madam Chair, just in relation to the stormwater, that's all likely to be completed?
Through the chair, we are in process still in the stormwater construction. We've got pond SRP3 complete. We're in building the eastern side dirty water drains at the present time and SRP1 still. So we have been delayed by the weather and by COVID shutdowns. The fact that we have SRP3, which is our big one at the bottom, complete, means that we are substantively better than we have been in the past. But it still doesn't mean we are complete in total. So at the moment, will probably be ongoing works on that for the rest of the 21-22 year, I would think, rather than we're definitely not going to be finished this financial year, I don't believe.
Right, yeah. Must be quite a lot of work to still do then, is there?
Yeah, there's one piece that's been quite difficult for us. The design has come back a couple of times, and it's on our western side dirty water and clean water drain, so toward the west, and it's because the bank, the landfill ground is about 30 degrees, so it's very steep, and trying to figure out how to get what is essentially 2.5 cubic meters a second down 70 meters down that hill without causing damage. It has been quite difficult. So we've had a couple of different goes at the design. The first one basically came back and said it was really difficult to build it because of the steepness of the slope. And so we've gone back to it. We're basically having to pipe that material down the hill at the present time is where we're getting to. So the rest of it is all, we understand what we're doing, how we're getting there. That piece, we've still got a little bit more work to do on.
So we have curbing or something to capture it into that pipe.
We will end up having a small catchment pond at the top, which basically has some sort of sump in it, which allows us to build up water behind and have a deep pool of water that then pressurizes the flow into those pipes, which allows us to get the pipes a lot smaller. And then it races down the hill.
Oh, I bet it does.
And we have to have something at the bottom to stop it from, it's running at something like 25 meters a second when it gets to the bottom of the hill. So, and then that's got to dissipate a large amount of energy at the bottom of the hill when it gets there. Now, the part of the problem with it is that we obviously have to design for a 1 in 200 year storm event. But most of the time, it's we're not going to have that flow, and so we also have to make sure that it's safe. One of the things I've been really conscious of is our safety reviews is making sure that local kids can't get into it or something and use it like a hydroslide and at the bottom of the hill. So we've got to be really careful about what we actually do from a safety perspective. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, are there any further questions on the report? Otherwise, the resolutions are on page 13. I have someone who's happy to move those? Move Trindy. Second Stuart. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you, Brad. Okay, we will now go to page 20, and this is the airspace leachate system resilience and stability report. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, this report has encompassed quite a lot of work, as you'll all be aware. We have, dug into the long-term life of the landfill and looked at our risk profiling for the landfill, not only during its operational period but post its closure. And one of the things we've done with our consultants, Tom and Taylor, is to look at what our risk profiling would be, in the post-closure after the landfill is closed. And it identified that some of the infrastructure that we have in isn't as good as it could be for those scenarios that we were looking at. Because of the way the resource consent that we have is worded, we have to do what's called a stability review every 10 metres of elevation of the landfill. And the last stability review has identified that we could go outside of our stability criteria if we continue to construct the landfill in the way that we're currently constructing it. So that meant that we looked at different options for mitigating that. At the present time, we've implemented an immediate change, which is to increase a step back at the landfill face, which basically means we can't fill the front of the landfill. And if we don't do anything else to change the stability criteria on the landfill, obviously that reduces the amount of airspace that we have in the landfill and reduces the life of the landfill. So the report basically looked at three separate elements. It looked at the stability of the landfill and the options that we have to mitigate or to improve the stability of the landfills to allow us to extend its life. It looked at the leachate system and the risk management processes and for the long-term life of the landfill. And it also looked at the airspace that we have in the landfill. And it combined those three elements into this one report. The outcome of the report basically said, because of the leachate system, the way it was built in 1985, it poses a risk to the landfill in the long term, particularly post closure. And so it was concluded that you would have to do some remedial works, even if you close the landfill, to make sure the leachate wouldn't build up and create instability issues. We looked at options for mitigating that. And improving the overall stability to allow us to get our airspace back rather than close the landfill quickly, and came up with an option or a preferred option, which we've put in the report, which is to build a tow buttress and to upgrade the leachate system at the bottom and put a secondary layer of leachate above that tow buttress to allow us to have essentially a contingency layer of leachate as well, leachate management. And so we've recommended that approach be taken forward. The cost of that was estimated at $5.9 million, and that's requested as an amount of money to be accepted by the board for inclusion in the business plan. The positive implications of that is it allows us to extend the landfill life back out to 2034 without any stability issues. And it also allows us to bring back some of the impairment that we have previously taken against the landfill life, because we had previously impaired the landfill life back down to 2030 rather than 2034. So that gives us essentially a saving against our current operational costs. So.
Excellent. Okay, we'll go to questions. I've got a couple of financial ones just to kick it off. So do we have sufficient funds in the current financial year for any design or initiating consenting work?
So we have already lodged a consent application for a global earthworks consent on the landfill site, and that's being processed at the moment. So there is that's already underway. In terms of the funding, we have an allowance of $600,000 this year in the 2021 year.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop you for a second. Are those windows open? It's really hard to hear over those machines.
It's,
Yeah.
Yasmin, that's the test on the generator.
No, they're closed. Okay. Considering how close Nathan is to me, I can barely hear him. Okay. I think it's just reverberating around. Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay.
Sorry, carry on.
So we have $600,000 in the budget that we can apply towards this year, which was already in the budget, and we also have some money for the road alignment works that we can also, which is sort of linked but not directly linked, that we can use for this financial year for getting the pre-works for that work underway.
And then just my other finance-related question is, how much contingency is built in to the 5.9 million?
There's around about a 20% contingency in that number. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So yeah, perhaps if Nathan pulled his mic in like you did, might help.
Okay. My apologies.
Yeah, no.
Around about 20% in that overarching budget. Yeah.
So just in relation to the splitting it over 2 years, yeah, so yeah, I think you've responded to the chair that some work's undertaken this year. Is there any way we could split that further? The 3.9 and the 2? Yes, we can. We can split it further and further. But the issue that we have is the further we split it, the less airspace gains we get. Because we are digging the material for the buttress from the back of the landfill, and we'll be putting it at the front of the landfill to use, all of the material we dig out of the back of the landfill gives us airspace. And that airspace is worth, I don't know, it's around about 200,000 cubic metres of airspace, so $30 or $40 million of airspace in that. So if we don't do that, the longer we take, the less we get. Yeah.
So we've sort of got a constraint that we could do it all in one go. That would be the best from an airspace gain versus, but obviously that also puts the biggest burden from a borrowing perspective on the councils. In the event that we shift it over 2 years, obviously it smooths that burden, but we will lose some airspace gains in doing so.
Because we're ahead of budget, and I'm not sure this is a question for you or Andrew, is it likely that we would have enough funds not to have to borrow so much from the councils?
I believe that we will run a surplus this year, assuming that landfill volumes remain at the level that we've been receiving. There's no reason to believe that they won't.
Would that adjust these two figures in the number 3?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Andrew for that.
It won't adjust the figures in your CapEx spend, but it will have a positive cash flow effect, and we only go to the councils for the balance required. So yes, the surpluses that we're currently running are cash surpluses and will help fund this. However, we've got an increasing level of funding required for the emissions credits, which are now a lot more expensive to purchase. So the work that also will require working capital. So I think you cannot look to the operating surpluses to fund your CapEx, but in the end it is one bucket. And yeah,
because I think we'll be under some pressure all round there. It's probably NCC will for budget pressures with free waters reforms, a dam and everything else that we've got going on. So it is going to be a little challenging to get these figures past their council, but we can only but try, I guess, if we approve them today.
Yeah, the best that I can do at the moment, the board can choose to do something or ask me to do something else. My recommendation is over 2 years, it's reducing the capital outlay on an annual basis. But it is still giving us good airspace gains that allow us to get right out to the end of our current consent. If we don't
do these works, we would potentially end up with not being able to, well, having to spend a lot more money because we'd end up going to having to build a new landfill earlier than.
Yeah, and that's what we don't want.
Yeah, so that was the key of why we did this work now, because already our airspace life was shorter, anticipated, forecast to be shorter than our consent life. And so we need to maximise that out to the 2034 consent life, because otherwise the costs, of getting the new landfill ready sooner, but also the impairment costs become quite significant. Andrew, I don't know if you want to take over on the accounting side of things from me, but maybe just talk a little bit about the impairment costs if our life is reduced significantly.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, the costs of running the landfill from now till the end of the post-closure cost time are recoverable during the life of the landfill. So if you increase any cost, OPEX or CAPEX, will need to be recovered over the life of the landfill. So if you change either the cost or the life, it's got an effect on your fees. It is possible that if for cash flow that you could run surpluses by increasing your gate charges to fund some of this CAPEX. But at the moment, the terms of reference only allow for a surplus of 300,000 to be retained. We have got deficits that we're catching up on, but yeah. Does that answer the question? I think Nathan wants to make a comment.
Yeah, through the chair, if we do this work, it reduces our overall cost to an increase at the landfill for gate fee around about $250,000 a year. If we don't do the work, as the two ends of the spectrum, we have an increase of around $800,000 a year in landfill costs. The reason is that we have determined that the leachate improvements need to be done irrespective of whether you are doing them now or doing it at the end of the landfill life. So you still have to, even if we did them when the landfill closed, we still have to accrue the money now for those. So that adds around about $500,000 a year to our annual budget to accrue that $3 million now, because at that stage, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to have increased the landfill airspace and therefore the life. So by doing it now, we changed the payment structures for them, for paying over 13 years instead of over 6. So it allows us to spread the cost over a much longer period. But what it does do is it requires us to ask the councils for capital funding compared to having a much larger operational funding.
And what about the consideration around the increased volumes that you're getting? That doesn't have any great effect?
So increased volumes, basically the way we do our business planning is we always assume a slightly less volume than we expect to get. And because if we don't and we start running a loss and we start accruing a lot more, obviously we go to a big deficit, and we don't really want to do that.
No.
So we do have some accumulated deficit at the present time, which is because of our reduced landfill life. We've obviously had to impair the life of the landfill, and so we now have to pay that additional post-closure costs back to over a shorter period. So it's meant that we have to pay more each year. But if one of the benefits of this, if we do the work and we get the extra airspace, is we actually can get that money back again, because we can basically say, well, we've already paid that amount extra during the period where we thought it was going to be end shorter, and then some of that money comes back to us. So, overall, we're in a position where if we don't do it, we get much more negative. We can look at alternative, trying to reduce the amount that we borrow. There is some options that we could go back and look at if we needed to, but my preference is that we ask both councils for the money first. And then if that's not possible, we would look for other mechanisms.
I think also coming back to, just that point that Andrew made is just, it's that difference between being a business unit and a CCO. is at the end of the day, we are still part of the councils, even though we are separate because it's part of both councils, but we don't have our own debt facility. And so, but would you call us a closed account, Andrew? How would you, because we still do manage our own finances like a closed account.
It is effectively a closed account within the two councils, 50-50. Yeah.
I guess for the chair, that allow the board to make decisions in and around the gate fee. I'm not sure what that means in relation to whether you could charge a higher fee to accrue money for this work. And that's something that Andrew might be able to give us more information on.
If you sort of have some resistance to that around consumer resistance to the gate charge, we get enough pushback now from some of our councillors about the cost of disposal.
Yes, I agree. There's always going to be resistance in the community. The new business plan actually reduces the cost compared to the AMP in terms of an annual charge. So you could choose to add, go back to what the AMP, that's not potentially.
It was quite a substantial jump though, wasn't it?
It is still in a substantial jump, yes. Yeah. The AMP had it at $335 or something. Oh, sorry, $205 versus $209. Yeah, $209.
Yeah, so it was going to be a 17% increase, and the new projections are 12.
Yeah,
and I think 17 is quite. We knew it was going to be quite high.
Yeah.
So so you could stay at that, but there's also. You normally debt fund CapEx rather than cash fund.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I just comment about the increase, a lot of the drivers for the increase are the government levies of the waste levy and the emissions trading scheme. And they're the biggest drivers of costs. So what we're talking about here actually in comparison is smaller.
It's very hard with the waste levy though. It's just circular money going round and round, it seems to me, to explain that to the general punter out there, that the land fee charges go up to pay the waste levy to pay back to the councils. It's just bizarre. Who thought of that?
Well, none of us in this room, so there we go. Okay. Andrew, do you have some questions? Because I'm cognizant that we managed to. Oh, sorry, can you use your mic?
The only concerns I had was about the buttress and the airspace and that, and the life of York Valley, and had a quick chat with Nathan, and yes, those questions have been pretty well answered. We're not extending the life of it. It's going to be costing us more, and will we have Eves Valley ready in time? Yeah.
Right. So for councillors, when this goes forward to, assuming we approve the resolution, then the next one for the business plan, what information do you feel might be additional to support your councillor colleagues to understand this? Do you think they need perhaps the presentation that we had explaining? I mean, there is a level of detail in that unless you're sitting around this table full time, that it might be a bit hard to suddenly jump them into tow buttresses, secondary leachate systems, PVC pipes, etc., etc. But is there additional information that, say, isn't in this covering report that you feel would be important for your councillor colleagues to know, so that they can truly understand that this is not only spending money to save money, but it's also spending money that's important, and I mean very important.
Madam Chair, I think it's around the potential life or not of the landfill and paying those costs forward rather than at the end. That's very difficult to get across to people generally in one attempt, isn't it? But I guess, will you and Nathan be doing the presentation? Yeah.
I'll certainly be available to be at any council meetings.
And I think if you have good PowerPoint slides, that would be helpful as well. We've only got David here, but I think we're having an annual plan workshop next week. So will this be part of that consideration or?
Through the chair, yes. So this is discussed by LT a couple of days ago, and they're just working up the slides for that at the moment, I believe.
So do you think they'll want this presentation for that workshop or a subsequent?
No, I think it's just one line item of many, because they're looking at the rates increase at the moment, and there's a bit of work to do back at a staff level, but I'm happy to loop back with Matt McGlinchey and talk about that.
Yeah, because I think we need to highlight
gets through.
We need to highlight this as
Yeah, no, I can certainly brief Matt on that.
And then perhaps in the new year do the presentation.
Yep. Okay. Yep. We'll both make ourselves available.
Do you think that it would be prudent to have our consultants there to answer specific questions? Or I've been intimately involved in the process. I think I can answer most, but I'm certainly not a geotechnical engineer.
Yes, that's always very difficult. Yeah, but possibly for the small cost, what it will say is possibly we've just had some.
Yeah. Okay, Trindy.
You're on the same city.
Through the chair, I think that's a very good question that you've been asking, because I've been trying to work through in my own mind. I'm already thinking through to February. So I've got our first infrastructure committee, I think it's towards the end of February, and this has to be on that report for the business plan. And I've been thinking in my own head as to how we do that. And I think this is, and I'm really just talking now. I'm unsure that having this come to the infrastructure committee cold is going to be a good thing. I probably think maybe a pre-workshop session, and maybe if that's a joint workshop, maybe. So Nathan will have to speak to the GAs, and I can see the GAs already going crazy because they've just sorted out the thing. But I think there will have to be at least a good hour with the joint councils. I think to do that at a committee meeting, or in your case a council meeting, would be a bridge too far, I think. Yeah.
Madam, do we have a joint council meeting scheduled for February or not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we have.
I know we have a joint FDS scheduled for 24th of June.
I think there's a joint committee on the 8th
of Feb. Yeah. So yeah, we can follow that up.
Development strategy. So perhaps we could have it on that same day.
Yep. Yeah, we'll follow that up because I do agree. I think a joint one is the best approach, and I also agree that having this cold at a meeting when
I agree too.
You know, while they're not deciding the technical elements, they need to understand. If you don't understand the work it is we need to do, why we need to do the work, then you don't understand the expense, and they need to understand the value of spending the money. So we'll follow that up. Thank you. Trindy, you had some questions?
Yeah, thank you. I think the report needs to spell out really clearly what we're trying to do is mitigate the risk factors that we sit with. So for me, there's like a financial risk. There's also an environmental risk, and there's a reputational one, because we've known about some of these things as a committee, but that's not widely known out there in community. So for me, I think it needs to be spelled out really clearly to both councils and the wider community about how we are mitigating it and the costs that we need to actually put up front for those, for me, those 3 areas. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, any further questions at all on this report? Okay, so the resolutions are on page 21. So it's receiving the report, improving in principle, the combined option 7, and then it's approving the inclusion of that into the business plan, which is the report we go to next. So I just want to double check that. Yep. Okay. So happy to move? Yep. Move Trindy, second myself. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. So we are now going to page 57. And this is the business plan report. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Through the chair, this report basically summarises the expected costs and the expected activities over the 22-23 year. We've had to make some assumptions around staffing roles and also around the reports that have just been approved to carry, so they are included in this business plan on the assumption that you were going to approve them. It basically looks at the cost of landfilling and has identified that with these changes that we've talked about, that the cost per cubic metre would be down compared to the AMP, and that's a positive from the regional perspective. So I'm more than happy to take any questions about any of the activities or issues in here. So thank you.
Okay, I'll kick off with a couple of questions myself. 2.1.6 in the report itself, it talks about achieving the reduced UEF relies on capital works being implemented to schedule. Is there any changes to priorities or timing that need to be implemented to achieve that schedule?
We have funding available for it. It's just basically being down to the capacity of the staff to get all of that stuff done. We have a master plan developed for the gas wells, and a big chunk of the risk is that if we can't get the gas wells in a timely fashion and suck out more gas and essentially burn it, then we would end up having to buy more credits per annum to pay for that. And given that the credits are going up in price a lot, then there's a risk on our budgetary aspects for that. So we've made certain assumptions in the long-term plan about the reductions in gas emissions, and we've really got to try and achieve those reductions. Otherwise, there is a potential significant operational expenditure that's not accounted for within the budgets. Am I comfortable that we'll get it done? The biggest issue with the ETS stuff is that it runs on a calendar year basis, not on a financial year basis, and so there's if we don't get stuff done on a calendar year basis, it ends up accruing into our finances for the next year. So we've really got to keep pushing forward as fast as we can. We are applying for a unique emission factor again this year to see if we have, and we're hoping that we will be driving down. But we've identified a few areas where we can make additional gains, and we've also got the new enclosed flare in and are using it as much as we can to destruct gas. So we think that they'll make some gains, but it's not entirely certain at the present time. There's still some work to do. We only have 2 weeks before we actually need to have all of that stuff sorted out, because it's done on the calendar year. So there's a bunch of work still going on at the moment.
My next question is just in relation to the strategic goals on page 68. I guess having read, the other reports prior to this, I just wondered about if we can add another strategic goal.
More than happy for you guys to ask for stuff.
So my thought was along the lines of considers the full life cycle of the landfills. And I guess that's taking into account not just the active life cycle when it's open, but the fact that, we also need to consider when landfills are closed. And that is part of that full life cycle of the landfills. So I'm open to what other board members think of that.
For those that are there pretty well, I can't see anything that's really close to that other than, no, I think, no, I have no problem with that.
I wonder if it actually covers it is applicable to all of them. So even if you added a word into the first sentence that it aspires to achieve the following goals over the whole of life of the landfill.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
If people are happy with that, then we'll tweak the wording. There's a resolution that means we can do minor amendments, but if everyone's happy with an inclusion along those lines, I like that suggestion. Thank you, Andrew.
Through the chair, I don't think it has any effect on the financial aspects. I think we are actually doing that already, and I think it's a great reflection.
It's about highlighting it, I think, and just, because
I'm more than happy about it.
As I said, it was just, I guess, reading the reports beforehand where, you're looking at potential environmental impacts going out hundreds of years. You have to, remember to not just be in the immediate, but you have to think about that longer responsibility that we have, that stewardship we have to the landfill and to the environment. My other question, so page 73. So about 2/3 of the way down the page, it says this budget is based on an emissions trading scheme factor reducing to 0.5 UEF 2022-23. What if the charges were, if we kept the increase in charges at 17% and reduced the reduction, like 0.6 or something like that? What sort of impacts would that maybe have? Would that help?
Well, through the chair, that would obviously, it would give us more lenient or more flexibility if we didn't achieve the UEF that we were aiming for.
I'm just hearing that the UEF, achieving that UEF is a real risk.
It's really important, I think, is what I'm trying to highlight here. It's important. I mean, the numbers are very significant. If you don't achieve that, the numbers are really significant. The downside risk is millions of dollars a year if we didn't get that. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is it is actually really important for us to be on top of that, of our game on that. Can we do it? We're striving to achieve it. We have a plan. We are, however, resource constrained, and that will potentially impact how quickly we can get all of this stuff done. So,
does the ETS unit price there make any difference to that, Nathan?
Well, the ETS, absolutely, it makes a difference. Basically, what the UEF does is basically says how many units we owe, right? And at the end of the year, the amount of units we owe depends on the amount of waste that comes into the landfill. In theory, the types of waste that come into the landfill, but in our case, our waste is close to the default factor. So we don't apply for an emission factor based on the waste composition because it wouldn't have any benefit.
Right.
And then how much of the gas that you theoretically would produce you've captured and destructed. So that adds up to the number of emission units you need. So if we don't capture and destruct as many as we think we're going to, then obviously it increases the number of units we have. And if we increase the number of units, obviously we need to buy more units at that high rate. At the moment, what we've been doing is buying forward units
based on what we think our emission factor is going to be, on the number we think that we're going to use. So if we actually accrue more units that we need, there's a cost implication to us, right? And so it is significant if we don't achieve that from a financial perspective. So I'm trying to highlight in here that that is an important thing that we need to keep on top of.
Is there anything else we can do to get it closer?
The only things we realistically have within our capability at the moment is to suck out more gas and to burn it, or to do something effective with it to destruct it. If we could, the other option we have is to put less in the landfill. So one of the things that we are doing is looking at options to divert material that is non-ETS material that would go out to the likes of the old Eves Valley Stage 2. That would then mean that we don't have to pay for the emissions of that material going into York Valley. So that would obviously add an additional reduction in that number of units that we'd have to buy.
What type of material would that be?
Hail and or other, material like that. So it's not a significant portion of our stream, but it is, every bit counts in this context.
Right.
Which I guess also reinforces the need to do that other work.
Yeah. Exactly.
But, we're running the budgets, pretty to the line with basically, 200K forecast surpluses.
Well, we would generally, through this year, we generally aim and would intend to run a zero surplus. That was the idea of this business unit. So, and the reason we've put in that 200K surplus is actually to pay back the accumulated deficits from previous years. So essentially that we have a deficit that we have incurred through the post-closure costs in the past, and we need to pay that off over the life of the landfill. If we do this work, then that 200,000 essentially could disappear because our life would be extended, and some of the money we've already paid back would be able to be essentially put into a surplus at that point. So I don't know if I answered your question.
So I guess I'm really trying to determine whether reducing the proposed increase from 17% to 12%, whether we actually have the financial confidence to do that. Because the numbers are fairly to the wire. And, okay, I know 17% is a big increase. It is, however, what we did consult on. So it wouldn't be a surprise if it was 17%. It is what we consulted on last year, earlier this year. And if reducing it to a 12% increase puts us in a more precarious situation, then should it be a 15% increase, or should it be, I know it's nice to reduce that increase, that fee increase, if we need to. If we don't need it, we shouldn't be taking it. But I'm just wondering if we do need it.
Through the chair, in the event that you were to choose to charge some more, it would give us some flexibility that if the things didn't go as well as we hope they will go in terms of the ETS reductions, obviously it would give us some more flexibility there. But it actually, even if we do achieve our targets, what it would do is essentially allow us to reduce the borrowing required for the funding of this next section of work for the stability review. So,
okay,
it's completely up to you guys.
Trinity.
This is probably of you, Andrew. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you stab at something for me? The difference between 12 to 15%. What difference would that be? Like the difference between 12 to 17 to 12 to 15. Sorry.
Yeah, my off the top of the head calculation was, that's about $10. That's 700,000 gross. David has done a more accurate one at $9, so $650,000 worth. But that's the sort of risk Nathan is quite right, that the risk of not achieving the unique emissions factor is very significant, because any additional credits we require, we have to pay market price for, currently $68. So, it's a big chunk of change. And whilst from an accounting perspective, we might use some of the ones that we've got in the bank, so to speak, we won't have them then for next year when we need them. So we would effectively, over the lifestyle, you're going to need that. I think given there's always soft figures and hard figures. The hard figures are the contract that you pay, the staff salaries. The soft figures are the post-closure costs, the depreciation. And the big risk here, the soft figures become real figures. And the risk here is quite high. Because to get it down to a 0.5 unique emissions factor is very significant. So we have assumed that. So really it's the gate fees are set by the board. And that would be if you wanted to increase the assumed price or the assumed emissions factor, then you could change that so that your expense then reflects a risk margin on it, and then bring that through. That would then come through on the gate price. So that's perfectly achievable. It is your call. I guess the two councils at the moment, the accountants have got these figures here, but it's if you think that's prudent, then and it would be prudent.
I think I am leaning that way. Look, I'm also noting that this is the draft business plan going to the councils for feedback. Now, we'll get the feedback in sort of Marchish. By then, we will know whether we achieve the UEF. We'll have some more knowledge around that. And so if when we sign off the final, we could reduce the 17% increase to 15% or to 12%, we'll actually have more surety then, rather than now in December. There's a lot of things up in the air, and I actually think the bigger risk would be going to the council saying, we can reduce this, we can do this, and then in February when we go to take this draft, we're not only going, here's our draft, we're going, and we don't have the best news for you. I actually personally think it would be more prudent to keep it the 17% increase, and we can always change it in the final. Is anyone, and I include anyone? Yep.
Just a question from me. So that flows through obviously into Tasman District Council's gate rates, and we're sort of working through that at the moment. But I guess the question for me would be, what would be the program for informing the commercial customers of the landfill? And the program would be, and my view would be sooner rather than later would be good, because we would propose to probably inform our customers sooner rather than later, and that way they've got more time to plan for it as well.
Well, as far as I'm aware, the 17% is what was already informed to them. So we wouldn't have told them we were reducing that. No. So this is why I'm comfortable, because this is the increase we had told them 8 months ago that we were going to do. And we confirmed that when we all signed off our LTPs at the end of June. So this is the increase. So, there's a potential, and look, if we could try and reduce the increase, but I think for me the key is we're not asking for more or suggesting they're going to pay more than what we consulted and put out for them. So to me, that's critical.
If I could then, so it's just perhaps confirming that we're on track for that 17%, just to bring it to the front of mind so it's not a big surprise.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I did some quick numbers on our current UEF is 0.885. We've assumed a 0.75 this year. The difference between those is 680,000. So it would actually match up quite well if you kept that, if we weren't to achieve it. Yeah. So it's, the 650 that you've got that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Secondly, we usually inform our customers of the price increase in December, so that they've got 6 months before those charges come in for the next year, so they can get their contracts in place. Obviously, if we were to inform them of the 17%, obviously at some stage later they may end up being able to reduce their prices or make a bigger profit either way.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have any comments on that proposal to keep that increase, Andrew?
Not on that proposal, but on 77 and emission studies and investigations. Previously, we had talked about either sending more of our gas emissions down to the company that supplies the hospital, and there'd also been talk around whether that company may wish to sell their company, and where have we got to in that investigation?
So we haven't got as far in that as we had hoped. We have a consultant working with us at the present time, and we are trying to have conversations with that company in such a way that we can then bring it back to the board for final approval to move forward. So at this stage, we haven't got to the point of getting it back to the board for final approval for any change.
What sort of time frame do you see, Nathan?
I was hoping that would be in our first meeting of 2022, so the March or late February, whenever that's scheduled for.
Alec.
Through the chair, I just wanted to give an NCC perspective. I think I agree with your approach, keeping it at 17%. And if you have any bonus coming less, then that's a bonus. But if we keep it at 17, it shouldn't be a surprise for anybody. For those that paid attention, it was in the LTP, so this shouldn't be a surprise.
Great, thank you. So the lovely Yasmin is going to be working on some amendments to the resolution for when that comes.
Through the chair, there was also obviously some changes to the tables within this business plan that will need to be done and done reasonably quickly. Andrew and I will need to work on that as soon as we can.
Yeah. So through the chair, Andrew and I Andrew just reminded me this is a public document. So people, for those again who are interested, will probably look up and thinking that it's going to be less. So we're going to have to just work through that.
I think it's, yes, it's a public document, but it's a draft of a document that then goes to two councils as a draft that then comes for feedback. So yeah, it's very much a preliminary plan. And yeah, it's just everything that we formally and publicly publish has clearly said the 17%, and we'll reiterate that to our customers. And as always, we will, be managing things as best we can with the information we have. And if we can reduce things, we will, but we're not proposing to increase is also the good news. There's the good news story. Now, page 76, under emissions management improvements, there is literally the one line, and I think that sort of understates quite significantly what we're doing. I was looking at some of the work that was in your quarterly report on page 86, and I just feel some of the actual works we're doing, because actually we're doing a lot in emissions management improvement, especially in comparison to previous years. So I'd like that reflected in the business plan, please. So whether it's some of the things that are listed in page 86 or elsewhere, I think our emissions management improvements are part of our good news story. as well as our other environmental considerations. So I think that needs to be beefed up. We don't need to do more work. We just need to tell the story of what we're doing.
I'm happy to do so. There's no problem there. Yep.
Great. I think everything else I had was relatively minor. Andrew, did you have anything else? No, Stuart? Trindy? Okay, so I'm just going to take a brief couple of minute adjournment just to have a think about the resolution, since we've made a few more than minor changes to the business plan. So feel free to get a cup of tea, but remember to wear a mask when you stand up. Okay, I'll just adjourn for a few minutes. Thank you. we'll reconvene the meeting. So we've got the revised resolutions on the board. So I think we have captured all of the key changes we need to make, plus one more, which I'll explain in a second. So basically, we've said that at this meeting, we've agreed to.
Can we put it?
Is there a cost right?
Yep. Let's see. There you go.
That's easier.
Is that easier? There you go. Okay, so the 17% increase in landfill charges from this year to next, the amended financials to reflect those fee changes from what's in the draft here, the amended unique emissions factor, the expanded emissions management improvement section that we just discussed, amended strategic goals section to reflect whole of life management approach that we discussed earlier, and then clarification of deed of agreement in terms of reference review. Now that one I've literally just added because I forgot to note on page 67, there just before the words number 3 introduction, it just mentions the requested review. And I just felt we needed to explain why we were doing that review, considering it does say that the terms of reference was revised in Feb. And so we'll just, explain the inconsistencies between the documents in that. And so then what was previously all part of the one resolution is that one to do and any other further minor amendments. And, I've noted a couple of typos in there and things like that. And that one just gives us a delegation to not do any other major changes, but to do any minor editorial amendments. And then, of course, we have the recommendation to the councils that comes under that. For when it goes. Are we able to scroll down just to see that? There it is. Yep. So are there any other questions, queries or suggested changes before we go to those resolutions?
I'm happy to move.
Thank you. Move Councillor Bryant. Second, Councillor Walker, Trindy and Stewart and Trindy. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much for that. That was a good discussion. Okay, so we now go to page 83, which is the quarterly report. Thank you, Nathan.
So thank you through the chair. Operations have been running well. There have, however, been some safety incidents that have raised my concern. From a financial perspective, the landfill is running at a surplus. We've currently got a surplus of 571,000 compared to budget due to higher waste input than we were expecting. In terms of the safety issues, we had 2 incidents at the landfill. There were 3 incidents in total, actually. 2 involved machinery reversing into other machinery, which I consider serious. And 1 where a staff member was struck by a piece of falling debris when he was opening the doors on a transport container, which is similar to an injury that we had 12-ish months ago. So I personally attended the investigation and toolbox meetings and other activities, and I came away somewhat concerned and have engaged an independent safety person to be involved in reviewing things further, and have made it very clear that there are some changes required to their systems and performance as a contractor on site. So it has left me wondering, how much operational involvement, I should have. It's not our responsibility to generate the safety plans, but it is our responsibility to make sure that those plans are appropriate and are being enacted effectively. So, which is essentially what with Brad and myself are doing now. So Brad may be able to have some more comment on that if he wants. I mean, I think I've covered it reasonably.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Through the chair. One of the big things that Nathan and I have been pushing with the contractor up there is a need to respond appropriately to incidents and unidentified hazards from an engineering perspective rather than an administrative perspective. It seems to be a common response across the industry is, oh, we'll update our plans and we'll brief the staff, but human error is always going to be there. So we're now really driving them to focus on putting engineering solutions in place which actually physically stop incidents like this from being able to occur. And that should be their primary target. It's not always achievable. Some of these things are quite difficult to do from an engineering perspective. But it's a word that WorkSafe like that they've got one. Practicable is the right term. So we are really trying to push them to get engineering solutions in a practicable manner to try and keep their staff safe.
And is this adopting use of, technologies and things like that, previously may not have been available, but actually now is?
Exactly. Example of that, the reversing incidents, there was the compactor backed into an excavator. So we've talked to them, both of the machines are fitted with GPS systems. They're now going away to look at options for those machines to talk to each other and actually put what's called a geofence around each machine, which means that the machine's operating system prevents it from coming within a certain distance of the other machine. So it doesn't matter what the operator does, it physically won't hit the other machine. It takes the operator error, the human factor out of it.
Excellent. I think the key is working together. We do have that you have that responsibility of making sure the plans are appropriate and that they're being implemented. But I think having that collaborative approach to safety is actually everyone's responsibility. So, we do have in our business plan that we want technological enhancements, and that's quite a good one. I like that. Thank you. Stuart, did you have?
And that's really good in relation to the machines, but just in relation to the falling debris, are we working towards them having systems where the operator doesn't actually need to be out of the vehicle?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. From the first, I had to clarify, the second incident was in from a slightly different style of tipping bin. So we're not sure if the systems we're trying to put in place at the moment will work in that particular scenario. But from the first incident, we've trialled modifying the large bins that come in from the transfer stations. They are currently a side opening door, which means that a member of staff has to get out and open that door, walk that door around and latch it back to the bin. We've trialled converting that to a top opening door, which means it opens under its own weight. Yep. Hinges just like a normal tipping deck, which means that there wouldn't need to be any staff member involvement. The first part of that trial hasn't worked quite as well as we'd hoped. There were some issues with that at the transfer station and compacting the waste into the bin. So we're just going back to review that and see if that can be expanded. We are currently just starting discussions for the second incident with the company. It's the waste that comes in from Westport. They use a container style bin on the back of their truck, which is dual opening doors, so a centre split, which makes it a lot more difficult to try and modify that. So we're having some conversations with them around.
They tend to have, without being disrespectful, slightly older gear, slightly more weather worn. I've seen it going past that place.
Yep, and that's correct.
Yeah, the operator's got to be vulnerable opening those type of systems.
Correct, yeah, but that's even worse than I think than the side opening doors because they are right in the middle of the back when they open.
So have you talked to that operator about perhaps changes to that system?
Yeah, so we're starting.
Are they receptive?
Correct, we're starting those conversations now, and they will have to be receptive. If they are not, we will simply change the access rules, which will bar that unit from coming in its current format. We can't have our staff being put in harm's way because someone doesn't want to make changes from their end.
Well, I guess that brings to me another question, Madam Chair, perhaps for that. So we're still receiving the Westport refuge. How much spike did we get after the July floods?
I'll let Brad talk to that, but yes, we are receiving that material.
Yes, so I can answer that one through the chair. They are no longer bringing the flood damage waste up that has been completed, and interestingly, I ran a report on it just yesterday. 1,506 tonnes of flood damage waste was brought in. So that is in addition to the normal waste that comes in from Buller District Council.
Right, so that's quite a spike, isn't it?
Over 2 or 3 months, it is considerable increase on the normal volumes.
So that's probably the increase in income you're talking about would have been partially through that.
That's quite possible, Councillor Bryant. We are working with Westport and with the Ministry for Environment to Westport have asked the Ministry for Environment to get a rebate of the Ministry for Environment fees because of the emergency conditions, and it looks like that is something. So that won't come to us. That'll essentially we will build it to them, and then they'll get it back directly from the Ministry for Environment, I believe. In terms of health and safety, we've obviously got some issues there. We're working on it. We're implementing improvements as we go. We have had some additional gains in terms of health and safety and environment stuff. The thermal imaging camera is now on site and is in use, so that's a positive. Any fire that was to occur after hours would be detected and would send an alarm. So that's a positive step forward. In terms of the capital works, as I said before, the SRP3, the big pond at the bottom, has been completed. We're just grass seeding and wanting to do some planting sort of around it to make it look a bit nicer, but that's going. Interestingly, since the winter when we were building everything during the big rainfalls, it actually hasn't had any water go into it. So we've now finished it, but we haven't had any rainfalls that would require it yet. So in terms of airspace, obviously we've spent a lot of time and energy over the last few 6 months on the stability and airspace review that you guys have now signed off. So that's really good to have that work complete and have a goal moving forward. And the other one that we've obviously been working on a lot is on our gas management system, and obviously getting that master plan for looking forward at the gas management. A couple of things have happened since this report was written. One is we've got our Ministry for Environment audit undertaken and complete, and we passed that audit with, I would say, flying colours. We're completely compliant. The audit is basically in relation to the chain of custody of waste coming into the landfill, the reporting structures around that, and and ensuring that they were happy with our processes, and that was good. They did make comment that they thought our systems were good, and we now, because we have the weighbridge and we link that to the tablets in the machines, if someone was to bring in waste with one type of waste and report it at the weighbridge as one type, but actually dump it, the guys at the landfill can see that it's something different. They can actually push a button on their machine and essentially puts an exception report out, and we can fix that and identify that immediately. So that's something that's really been quite effective and helpful for us. And secondly, they were really impressed by our litter bund or litter fencing. So they hadn't seen that before. Not that that's in their direct purview, but that was quite good. So it's good to get some feedback, because those guys are going down around different landfills all the time. So I don't know, Brad, do you want to have any further conversation?
No, they were just very happy with how we're managing the waste levy returns, and that the systems in place are robust in capturing all of that waste accurately and ensuring that we're actually paying Ministry for Environment for the waste that's received.
Just a further question about resourcing for staffing. How's that process going, or recruiting staff more directly?
So I met with the NCC HR lady that represents us at the moment, and last week, and we're basically choosing to look at the structure. I previously had an idea of how to do it, but we obviously went out to the market and couldn't find a staff member for the role. So we're looking at redoing how we would recruit for and the roles that we will recruit for, so that we can recruit for roles that are more likely to be able to be filled. And what that will mean is that we'll end up changing some of the responsibilities I would have. I'd potentially pick up a bit more activity engineering stuff, but if we get more capacity at administrative and contracts sort of management level, then it would reduce the workload that both Brad and I have in that area. So hopefully free up some time for us to do some of that more strategic work.
How many roles are we talking?
Potentially 5 in total is the, it may,
That's all within budgets, is it?
yeah, so the budgets allow a certain amount of money for the stuff in the LTP, and I'd included some funding for that stuff. We just haven't been able to implement it at this stage.
It's quite a deficit. It must be making a pressure on you guys.
Yes, it's definitely adding up. What we do have is we have external consultants, obviously, but they end up costing us a lot of money.
Yeah, more expensive.
So we have obviously the current acting activity engineer. Unfortunately, won't be available. I'm negotiating with her new employer to get her for 50% time. So we won't be able to get her for the amount that we're using her at the present time. And we also have some other contractors supporting us with some of the operational aspects. But clearly we want to try and bring some of that more in-house to reduce those costs if we can.
So that'll be a priority in the new year.
Yes, so basically I'm trying to work. So I've got a meeting on Tuesday with the HR people again to go through the structure, look at the role descriptions, and also how to fit that into the budgetary constraints that we have, and see where we go. And then we'll try and get that business case to both council staff, Alec and Pat and Janine, in the early new year, so that's available for us to start with the recruitment on that new. Part of the reason I've chosen to redo it is regional services obviously represents not only the landfill business unit but also the regional sewage business unit, and with Three Waters, obviously those roles are somewhat incompatible. There's one would go, the regional sewage will be part of the Three Waters reform, the landfill wouldn't be.
Correct.
And so one of the options we have is to essentially employ people more specifically. So the contracts or the role would be for NRSBU and one would be for NTRLBU, and then in the future it would be clear what those roles would do post Three Waters.
Anything else you wish to highlight in your report, Nathan? I want to thank TDC and NCC. I'll thank David and Alec just for the waste minimisation information, and it's section 10, so that's a new thing. It just gives us a bit of that high level picture of where a key portion of our money is spent, and so great to see those activities. Of course, as you'll note, that the two councils have very different approaches for how the LDL is used, but we're quite different geographically and in a lot of ways.
So through the chair, there's only one other statement I wanted to make. In this original, you've asked us to put in a comment in these reports in future for the ETS position that we have. We've chosen, but we didn't do that this time. We haven't actually made any changes since the last time we talked. So we have chosen not to write anything about it. We would expect in the new year, the first meeting of next year, there will be an item in there in regard to that, because we would have changed the ETS position.
It's great to see the litter management fences are in and making a real difference. Thank you for the photo of those as well. That was good to see. And I guess just picking up from Councillor Bryant is just acknowledging, that potential structure of 5 staff and acknowledging that we currently have 2, and just acknowledging the pressure on them to keep delivering. I hope you're both able to get something that represents a decent break over Christmas time. Any further questions from anyone? Okay, so it's been moved by Stuart, seconded by Andrew. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So in closing, I just want to again thank everyone who is around the table here today for your contribution towards this business unit, and pass on my thanks, David, to Mike Schroer and Richard Kirby as well, who aren't here, but we have a lot of work that we've achieved. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but yeah, thank you, everyone. I really like this group and are really always pleased to see the changes that we're making each time we meet. So thank you very much. Call the meeting to a close. Would you like to close with a karakia, Andrew?
Excuse me, Judine, or Madam Chair. So I can better report back or get better feedback from iwi or TDC and Nelson City Council. Do you have any issues with me when we get this information, like we got it on Monday, that I engage with those iwi practitioners within the taiao so that it's can have a...
The pressure's not just on you.
Well, yes, I want the iwi to be able to have that ownership into
absolutely
here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that that's tickety boo.
Yeah, we do have some issues around anything that's confidential, of course, but today everything was an open meeting, so absolutely. And I think Nathan will tell me if I'm wrong or pull a face. If you ever need Nathan to come and talk to any one of the groups, then feel free to be in touch directly with Nathan if that would help, especially, maybe with the airspace management, land stability and leachate system. If there was any further discussions or just clarification around that might be helpful, feel free to be in touch with him. And he could also come and, Zoom or meet.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to be involved in any conversation that you want. And I really do appreciate the fact that you take part and put a good input into these meetings. And if you can do that with a more consolidated view from all of the different views of iwi, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, I'll certainly support that.
Awesome.
Yeah, we really welcome it. If you
Thank
can
you.
close.
And thank you very much, Brad and Nathan, for the good work you've done. Hearing the limited capacity and resources that you have, well done. Thank you.